A quick note before we dive into this episode, we had some technical issues on this one on the back end, our provider that we do these through. So this video quality is worse than usual. Really sorry about that. We will have it back up and like usual next week. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoy this recap episode. I am recording this in between events at NFT NYC. Hopefully I got to see you here. If not, next year. Hello everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. We are doing our weekly recap episode today here from NFT NYC. And I am joined by the wonderful Jon Rogers, who I feel like at this point I mention in like every episode because he is behind all of my greatest insights in this space. And so he's joining me today to weekly recap with me. Zeneca could not be with us because he is sick with COVID, sending lots of healthy thoughts to Zeneca. Jon, thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you for having me, GM. And I hope Zeneca gets better soon. And
I offered to bring him soup, but he did not take me up on the offer. Okay, we are going to get into observations about NFT NYC, stuff going on with Yuga Labs, with Doodles, Ape Fest, everything that we're tracking this past week. But before we get into all of that, we do need to hear a word from our wonderful sponsors.
If you're starting on your NFT journey, you need MetaMask. This is your tool to unlock the world of DeFi and NFTs without giving up custody over your private keys. MetaMask is both a secure in-browser wallet and also a secure bridge for your hardware wallet so that you can connect to any Web3 enabled website. You can now trade tokens with any DEX or aggregator. MetaMask Swap gathers real-time pricing information across the DeFi exchange ecosystem, allowing you to select your best price while getting all of the MetaMask benefits of self-custody, lower gas costs, and increased transaction success rates. MetaMask also has a fantastic mobile wallet, which I use while I'm out and about. And I use it to collect POAPs, NFTs, and use it for all my DeFi things while I'm away from home. If you haven't downloaded MetaMask, you gotta try it out. Download MetaMask for desktop and mobile at metamask.io, or load up your Ledger, Trezor, Keystone, or Lattice hardware wallets so that they too can get into Web3. It's increasingly obvious that everything will become tokenized, and NFT marketplaces needs robust financial reporting, performance analysis, and the peace of mind that they are compliance ready. GILDED's NFT Ops is a one-stop financial reporting solution for growing NFT platforms. GILDED has developed marketplace-specific modules to track the financial performance of NFT creators, including revenue tracking, collection metrics, royalty payments, and revenue share. Customers of NFT Ops gain full access to accounting tools and powerful APIs for custom integrations that simplify operations, streamline reporting, and produce tax-ready data. So no wonder why so many top brands like CoinMarketCap, Gitcoin, Nifty's, and POAP trust GILDED to automate complex reporting workflows. Visit gilded.finance/bankless to learn more.
Let's just start. We'll get into NFT NYC in a minute, but just like macro, what's happening in the market? How are you feeling during the bear market, Jon? We haven't actually spoken on the podcast since everything went down.
Yeah, you know, I appreciate that there's a lot of people hurting out there, and
yeah.
So I know it's a tough time for a lot of people. I'm actually if there's anything good to come out of this market, it's that it's a great time to build. And so I'm excited about the opportunity that it's, you know, some scammy projects are disappearing. Some shady DeFi stuff is kind of getting sorted out. That in the market, it's doing its job there. So I'm excited for what's to come and the opportunity to come. In fact, that's one of my observations of this week is there's so many mainstream media going to NFT NYC saying, why are you people still here? Like, it's over, isn't it? And it's like, no, we're building. This is now the time. And so I'm very hopeful. I personally am not exposed to cryptocurrency very, very much at all. So I've not felt the pain that a lot of others have felt. And as I said before, I've never sold an NFT. I don't even know how. I really don't. Whatever I buy, I hold for the long term. And I have never sold an NFT. So I'm, you know, anything that's in my collection that's gone down in value, I'm not realizing because I'm there for the long term. Are you buying anything? I am. I'm looking. I'm shopping.
What are you shopping for?
I'm shopping for a little noun right now. I'm excited by little nouns. I'm just waiting for the right one. You know, I'm waiting for the right one to come up in the auction, and whenever I see the right one, I lose the auction. So I either need to up my bids or just be patient. But there's a lot of them coming, so I'm not
What's
too worried
exciting
about
to you about little nouns?
You know, I'm interested in playing around with CC0 NFTs. I own a Bony, which I really love my Bony. That probably is going to come off very poorly. But I'm interested in playing. What you mean. Yeah, I'm interested in playing around with CC0 a little bit, and I like this idea that it's a very long-term project. Every 15 minutes ish, a new one is minted. And, so I'm excited about that. The other ones I'm shopping for are Aku. I want to get an Akutar. Maybe once I pay for some tuition bills later this summer, I'll be in the market for an Akutar and Deadfellas. I've talked about Deadfellas quite a bit, and probably time that I join the horde.
Yeah, that's awesome. You and I both. Everyone who listens to this podcast with any regularity knows I'm a huge Aku fan, Akutar fan, Micah Johnson fan, all the rest of it. Well, very cool. I'm interested by the Little Nouns experiment too, and for folks who maybe haven't been following it, I'll give the very quick TLDR. You're probably familiar with nouns. Every day, a new generative piece goes up for auction, and that will be true in perpetuity. Every 10th noun goes to the founding team of Nouns, but Nouns is a CC0 project, and all of the proceeds from the Nouns sales goes into a treasury. I talked about this with Jake Bruckman, who's the CEO of CoinFund, because he was bullish on Nouns. And now Little Nouns is like a derivative project, also CC0, and it's the nouns just smaller, as the name would suggest. And instead of every day a little noun going on auction, it goes on auction every 15, 20 minutes or so. It's a little bit variable only because if you bid on a little noun in the last 5 minutes or so of the auction.
It extends the auction if there's bidding in the last minute.
And the little nouns have been going for what, like 0.4 ETH or so, typically?
About on the lower end, 0.35. On the higher end, about to 1 ETH for either particularly notable numbers, like round numbers, or if someone is minted or one is generated automatically with unique traits that are highly desirable, those are going for a higher amount too. But about 0.4.
Little Nouns is supported by, or has the support of the Nouns community. Is it every 10th little noun that goes to Nouns?
Yeah, essentially every 9th and 10th. So one will go into the Little Nouns treasury, and then one goes into the Nouns
Big
treasury.
Nouns treasury. Big Nouns treasury. I think it's such an interesting experiment in like human coordination and treasury coordination. I'm a little bit skeptical, especially on the Little Nouns front, just because of the supply that'll be created in this over time. It's just hard to imagine how it maintains value, but
I think about it more in the long term. Let's fast forward 7 years from now, and let's assume what we all hope happens, which is this billion wallets on the horizon, that there's just a huge growth in NFT use and fanship. The number that's being minted won't be that large in that context. In fact, a couple of things we can talk about today are 2 different announcements about, quote, millions of NFTs for minting, one from the Doodles team and one from the Hypermint team. And if we get to that world where we're minting collections in the millions, 10,000 little nouns is not going to be anything. So that's why I'm in for the long term. I'm going to get 1. I'm not going to get 5. And I'm going to just be a part of the community and see how it goes. And
I think that's smart. I think tracking that community is smart. The challenge is, since it does go on for forever, there's never like real pressure on the secondary, it would feel like, because folks can obviously always buy in anew if they so chose, right? The supply is infinite from that perspective. But I get earlier numbers are more prestigious, or there's certain traits that people want that come earlier. And, I get that you can game it out that way. And of course, this is all coming at it from just like a purely like market perspective of like, is it going to go up in value? I have been very impressed, I will say, by how incredibly well the Nouns auctions have held up in terms of, still I look and they go for 60, 70 ETH a day.
Even higher, yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Maybe it's higher now. I think at one point, sort of at the lowest point of the market, I was looking at them and they were like 60, 70 ETH. And I was like, gosh, that is amazing. So
yeah, it's beyond the reach of my wallet, but and that's one of the things I guess with Little Nouns. It's a way to participate with nouns in an authorized, collaborative way without having to open up a wallet with 80 ETH to buy one.
Mm-hmm. What I appreciate about you, and it's funny to hear you be like, yeah, I really have very little crypto exposure. I don't even know how to sell an NFT. And yet you're somebody who I think is one of the savviest people in the space. Like, you are tracking everything that's going on. You're sending me articles all the time about what's happening. So you're this very interesting, I feel like, unicorn in the space, which is you bring a really sharp, smart, like critical insight to it without really being like your normal DGen, which is perhaps how we get along. Neither of us are like your entirely typical DGens, really.
I look at, we've got multiple communities within the NFT community. And one of them is coming more from the cryptocurrency world. They're probably the really DGen OG crowd and for them, a lot of NFTs are really about the value and the value accrual. It's an investment, in some ways acting as a security. And there's this crowd that I think I'm more a part of, which we're coming in later. We're still early adopters, so it's weird to say later, but coming in at this point, and it's more about the art and the storytelling. And I'm not looking at it, and a lot of people like me are probably not looking at it as it's a financial security as an investment. Yes, we'd like to see whatever we buy go up in value, but it doesn't mean that that's the first and primary consideration. Mm-hmm. And I think the more mainstream buyers coming in, like call it the masses, when they start coming in, they're going to be more probably in my camp in background than they are from the financial side of things.
Absolutely. I interviewed Robbie Ferguson yesterday, who's the CEO of Immutable X, co-founder of Immutable X. And we were chatting, and one of the things that I said is like, I do look forward to the era of NFTs, and this will be the mainstream era, I believe, where their first and foremost point is not necessarily to make you rich. That like you buy them because you want access to a certain thing, and maybe they subsidize the experience for that because you do own an asset that maybe has some value, but it may not even be value that's higher than the price you paid for it. It's more just subsidizing your membership to a group, or subsidizing your ability to watch a piece of content or play a particular game. And I think that's we'll end up having that mental shift from these are speculative assets that I should make a lot of money on. And maybe that some version of that will always exist, but really these are things that are getting me access that I want. And an added benefit is that I get to own a digital work that I could sell and subsidize whatever experience I got. Yeah.
TOOLKIT, what's Gary Vaynerchuk's restaurant that's opening?
Flyfish Club.
Flyfish Club. Yeah. So token gated access to experiences like clubs or. Absolutely. Yeah, I had I know we will move on in the agenda, but it's the last week of school here in Oregon, which is why I'm not in New York, because I can't. My daughter's young enough that she would still never forgive me if I left her the last week of school. Oh. But someday, a few years from now, she'll want me to get the hell out of town, in which case I'll start the NFT. See, but so we had a parents' kind of dinner at one of the houses after the last day, and one of the parents works in probably the boringest industry you can possibly imagine. But they're beginning to look at insurance. I don't want to give it up because I might actually be partnering with them. And this was the point of this industry, is looking at how can they use NFTs as part of business operations. This isn't about selling to the public, but about how do they transfer and coordinate the movement of goods and information using NFTs. And so it wouldn't be the sexy kind of art-focused NFTs, but these would be business process NFTs that. Yeah,
it's leveraging smart contracts for what they do well.
Precisely.
And I think that's a great way of putting this shift that I was describing, is really like abstracting the what we think of as NFTs from smart contract technology, which is fundamentally like a human coordination technology, and understanding that there's going to be really powerful use cases for those smart contracts. That's exciting. Well, you'll have to come back on if you formally work with that and tell us more details about that. But I love hearing those kinds of things. NFT NYC Observations. I'm excited to get yours because you're not here, which may sound funny to say that I'm excited to get yours, but I'm curious what it looks like from the outside looking in. So hit me.
Yeah, I'll hit you up with the first bullet point in our agenda. In the quote that I'll put is, "It's raining men." So you're on the ground. Is that, what I'm seeing on crypto Twitter is it's all men. It's it's gotten a little bit better with gender ratios in the last couple, since after the first day. But what's your perspective? You're on the ground there. Is it really the truth, or is it more diverse?
I feel like I've become numb to it. And I've worked in fairly male-dominated industries for years now, honestly. And so, yes, of course, it's dominant men. I've been to a couple events that I'm like, wow, this is even worse than kind of usual. Though I think on the whole, it's better. To your point, like I kicked off Monday I was at We Are Web3, which was conference, like a 1-day mini conference within NFT NYC that was hosted by Meta Angels. And it was, I believe, exclusively women, non-binary folks. And so it was, that was lovely to kind of kick off the whole week with all women essentially. And then you go from that to the main conference and it's very dominated by men. But again, I almost feel like it's only when I see somebody call it out that I like recognize it anew, because I just have gotten so used to these spaces being this way. I saw the funniest meme I saw about it, and I will say I do think it just also plays well. It's just like easy to make jokes about it on Twitter, so it's not. It is very true, but it also is just like
it falls into stereotypes of what we think about kind of tech-oriented communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always have a mixed relationship to it, because there's a piece of me that sometimes worry the more we like emphasize that publicly, that it dissuades more women from joining the space. So like anytime these kinds of conversations come up, I always like to emphasize, like, I've had a lovely experience in this space, and have felt really like welcome and a part of things, being a woman. So it's maybe silly to say it on this podcast, because if a woman is listening to this podcast, they're probably already in this space. But I like to signal that to people, because I don't want women to be like, hear all the jokes about how it's all men and be like, well, then I'm not going to join. It's like, no, come in. The water's lovely. But my favorite meme about this all was, those like CAPTCHA things where it's like click all the boxes.
I saw that. I did. Yep.
Like fire trucks in it. There was one that was like click all the boxes with women in it. If none, click skip or whatever. And it was just a picture of an NFT NYC event. There were no women, and it was quite funny.
I saw that. I think someone should make a T-shirt of that.
Yeah. Again, not the signal I want to send to the rest of the world, but it's hilarious.
Well, it's good to hear. And I do think there's a greater theme of we need to keep pushing for gender and racial diversity in the community. It's only going to help and grow, make us stronger.
100%. And like what I love, like these jokes are calling it out, because I think most people in the space, or maybe I just have tunnel vision and I only talk to the people who I think are reasonable, who all agree with this, is like agree, and I don't feel like there's actually that much pushback to that. And it's, I don't know, I'm sure in dark corners of Twitter there are, but I ignore those corners.
Well, the next thing I heard a lot about on my crypto Twitter feed from remote cross country is anyone going to the conference, or are they just going to parties?
I literally don't think so. I know so many people who canceled their speeches at the conference. And, look, these conferences take a lot of work to put on, so credit to the people who do it. But I do think this was not the best organized conference in the sense that like 1,500 speakers was too many. It felt very like, what is the point of having 1,500 speakers? And it did feel like it was because the organizers wanted 1,500 people to be tweeting about how they were speaking at NFT NYC to like get more money, to it does start to feel a little bit like this is just strategically so they can make more money and not because it's actually what's best for the conference. I love NFT NYC because I live here, right? And so it's lovely for me to get to go home at the end of the night. And I think it's really fun because it's New York City. And so there's so many cool events happening, but I haven't been to the conference. All of the cool events that I've observed have all been these satellite events and the parties and the stuff that's going on sort of outside of the conference. I would be truly fascinated to know how many people actually have attended the conference.
I don't know if you probably haven't seen it. It was just this morning. We should probably say we're recording this on Thursday morning. Supermassive tweeted out he was at one of the conference sessions, and it was an empty ballroom. There's like 10 people in this large ballroom. And he's like, why isn't anyone at the conference? And it's a pretty, I feel bad for the speakers who you're speaking to an empty room. I've been in that position and it just sucks. And the organizers who probably brought those people in it's just not great. So I think there's this overall theme coming out of this year about NFT NYC needs to figure out what it wants to be. Is it the place where there's going to be all these huge parties, in which case that's great, and communities come together and celebrate with each other? Or is it a place for learning and sharing of information? And there just needs to be some adjustments. And it's a young...
That ship has sailed. They can't... Sorry.
You
do keep talking.
No, keep going. I want to hear about the ship has sailed.
I know. There's no turning this boat around. First of all, it's New York City, so there's always going to be the party element to it because it's New York City. And so there's no decision here. The organizers of NFT NYC are no longer driving this ship, right? And so they do not get to suddenly decide that NFT NYC is like the place for like learning and studious commentary on the space. NFT NYC is for like crazy parties and Madonna headlining stuff because she wants to come to New York.
So the crew is mutinied and they're taking over.
That's correct. New York has done what New York does and just says like, we're New York City, baby, the city that never sleeps. And that's what this conference is. I really think there's no putting the genie back in the bottle, so to speak.
That's fine. It's fine. You know, that other events will emerge that are more about the learning and sharing of information. And it might be Miami or LA or somewhere else. And that's great. That's fine. That's
yeah. Did you find NFT LA had that, like, it's hard for me to, like, any of these big cities that I think have like a real like nightlife culture, it just feels like that becomes more appealing to folks than sitting in conference rooms, and the conference room ones are more like, you know, like the ones like coordinated by the Ethereum Foundation, like the really like, you know, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think you're gonna have the same problem right now. Where the industry is, it's gonna be a lot of parties, and I think Punk 4156 actually had a great Twitter tweet or a couple of small thread about this, about in real life, IRL events are going to become a bigger and more important part of the industry. And I agree completely with that. I just think you're going to find what are the segments that each of these events specializes in. And we don't have to have, let's say you're an big NFT project. You don't have to go to every event and have a party at every event. And I think there's an opportunity for, all right, we're going to go to New York and we're going to have our party, and our community will know that that's where we have our big party. But we're going to go to South by Southwest, and we're going to have a brand activation that's more about an experience than a party. And that's where we do that. And I think that's how it's going to evolve. And I think there's
that makes sense. Consensus, I thought, did a really fantastic job of striking a balance. Consensus in Austin, which I was recently at. Like, I felt like people actually attended those panels, and permissionless folks really attended panels. Permissionless was absolutely like a learning one, in addition to, of course, parties and fun. But that's more DeFi. It's not so much NFTs, metaverse stuff, though there was some of that. But yeah, Consensus, I thought, did a good job and really had some people showed up for the conference side of things.
Yeah. The other thing, kind of moving on, the other thing that I got out of my feed and kind of my network of friends and contacts was, and this is, I think, really interesting about the space, is that just about every Hollywood studio, streamer, and broadcaster has reps on the ground in LA, in New York. They're certainly in LA, but they're on the ground in New York. They're stealthily going around, going to the parties, hopefully the conference too. And they're beginning to take this much more seriously, to the point that they're sending development folks. And so the word I heard from my network was it was like a reunion of an LA development meeting, that you're at an event and all of a sudden there's the guy from Disney and there's the guy from Warner Brothers is over there, and there's the woman from Universal. So
what are they looking for, in your opinion?
I think they're looking for a couple things. First of all, just knowledge about the space. What is the community? What is this emerging world of potential storytelling coming out of NFTs and in Web3? I also think they're looking for contacts of good, who are the right people to talk to, who are the right people, who are the wrong people to avoid. So just trying to find contacts too.
And do you think they're keeping their eye on different intellectual properties?
Absolutely.
And
yeah, absolutely.
Like, should we partner with these and create stories out of these? Wow. One thing, and I guess we should flag, Jon was the head of franchise for Disney for many years and worked at Lucasfilms. And if you haven't heard my previous episodes with him, you should go check them out, and you can get a better sense of his background. So he knows this world very, very well. One thing that I've heard now a number of times from various project founders, Women and Weapons, we talked about this at Consensus when I interviewed them, like Micah Johnson in many ways said this with Aku, and he does have a movie in development. But these NFT projects, these big ones, seem to be able to get meetings with any of these studios and senior people. But where things start to fall apart is when they say, yeah, like 800 unique holders. They go through the spiel. They're like, we've made this much money. We have 100,000 followers across our socials. And the execs are like excited. And then they're like, cool, like how many people hold your NFT? And it's like 5,000. And that's on the high end, And these development folks are like, womp womp. Is that check out for you?
Yeah, I can understand where that's coming from. What they're going to be looking for, if they're going to acquire the rights to Project X to make it into a potential movie or streaming series, is that they want to see a built-in fan base. So you go back to Harry Potter, when that was just the blockbuster publishing series, and Warner Brothers acquired the rights to that. What they were acquiring was beyond more than just the books. They were acquiring that fan base. And so I think having how big is that fan base and how active are they is going to be a very big consideration. What I would counsel to the studio development teams is this is an emerging space. It's brand new. You're not going to see 5 million fans that are going to come in the door with this project. It's more about developing the project as an original IP. You've got a head start with what's been created so far. And so it's going to be a little bit tougher launching this brand and this potential franchise because it's going to be more akin to doing it from scratch. But you're doing it with a whole new element of engagement that hasn't been possible before, and a whole new way to produce materials and to support that that's never been available before, which gives it a push in the favor of doing the project.
Well, I will be very excited to see out of this era which ones really do develop into long-term IP. I know you have some bets on what some of those will be. Maybe we'll talk about that, but it'll also be interesting. I think there's this untested theory to me, which is if you have a blockbuster film on your hands that was born out of NFT IP, then those underlying NFTs should do quite well. Again, looking at just like from a price perspective, for example. But we don't really know. Like, I really believe that Aku and Akutar, like, there will be a really well done film that will have mainstream appreciation, and that the mainstream will adopt and come to know and love the Akutar character, or, you know, Aku character, let's say. I just think it has that magic. What does that mean will happen to the NFT? Like, in theory, it goes up, but I don't really know. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's all theoretical, of course. But I do agree. I think in theory that should increase the value of those NFTs. It should make them more desirable, because all of a sudden your fan base, let's just say Aku has a fan base of 10,000 NFT owners. I think it's bigger than that, 15,000. Let's just say 15,000 NFT owners.
You think it's that big? I don't think it's that big.
Let's say 10,000. So they have 10,000
Sure.
NFT owners, maybe fans like myself who do not own one, but like the project and follow the project. So say triple that. So let's say you're at 30,000 fans. All of a sudden, say you make a movie or a streaming series and it's a hit, your number of fans is going up by millions. And so theoretically, at least even a tiny portion of those millions of fans, if they want one of the NFTs, the origin of the story, then they should theoretically go up.
Demand should rise. But there is a distinction, I think, between good content, good media, good movies, and then content, media, movies that inspire wild fandoms. Like there are properties that lend themselves to really cult followings where the fans feel a sense of ownership almost over the property. Star Wars obviously being like the quintessential example of that. And then movies where like that's a solid film, critics liked it, people liked it, but it doesn't develop like a just crazy fandom around it.
Yeah.
And,
Avatar, good example of that. Biggest movie of all time. I believe it's still the biggest movie of all time, and not adjusted for inflation. And it never really developed a fandom around it. Great movie, just never quite had a fan base that certainly not like Star Wars ever had, or Harry Potter has.
Yeah, where the lore just captures people and wraps them into some world. Well, I mentioned Avatar.
James Cameron Avatar, yeah.
Yes. Wow. I think because Avatar also then is like your avatar can be your profile picture, and we're talking about Akutars, and I just had one of those moments. Again, I've been drinking all week where I'm like, is Avatar the name of the movie that you just mentioned? Yes, of course. Blue characters in Avatar. I mentioned it a couple weeks ago, I think when I was speaking to Zeneca, because you had mentioned that as like being an example of something you see, you're worried is happening in the NFT space today. Is Avatar came out, it was a 3D movie. It did incredibly well because it was shot for 3D. It was like made for this. And then Hollywood was like, all right, we're going to try and capitalize on this 3D movement, make a ton of 3D movies, but not shoot them for 3D. So they're going to be kind of like crappy knockoff 3D movies. And then you burn the audience off of 3D, where they're like, well, then their impression for 3D starts to be that it's kind of a negative experience because they didn't actually do it well or invest the proper resources in it. And that you see Hollywood doing something similar with NFTs by doing these like cheap partnerships where they like just offer a cheap NFT for some movie property.
Yeah, I'll riff on that for a second. So the analogy here is that to do a 3D movie, there are two methods. There's the shoot it in 3D, release it in 3D. That's like Avatar was done. It's expensive. It's a little bit more complicated when you're actually in the production process. It uses processes in post-production that aren't quite the standards or the norms, so it's harder to do. But the consumer experience, the audience experience is better. The other way to do it is just to post-convert it. So you have someone sitting and essentially pulling elements out in post that make them 3D. And you're charging a premium for the experience. And what happened was they burned the audience. They charged premium prices for a lesser product, and the audience rejected it. And there were people like Katzenberg in the industry screaming bloody murder, like, stop doing this. You're killing this golden goose. Why are you doing this? And sure enough, 2-3 years later, 3D was all effectively dead. So what's happening in the NFT space, my worry is that we're seeing some projects, and these are more the studio projects, licensed NFT collections, that you launch one, it didn't work. And rather than adjusting and learning and reconfiguring to try to figure out what went wrong, the next one comes along. And the approach with licensing is, all right, it's a t-shirt. We're going to have a t-shirt brand this year, and we'll do it again next year. And in NFTs, it's even if NFT licensing, it's not that. You can't just bring brand X back next year as a new NFT drop because it failed this year. Like, you've burned that brand for a number of years. And that's what I see happening with some of these licensed properties, is that they're not just taking a pause and reconfiguring and learning from the mistakes. It's just repeating what had been done before. And my worry is the burning consumers, because these are bringing in new wallets, and these are new consumers in our space, people that we want. And my worry is that they're going to burn these wallets. These people are going to have a bad experience. They're going to walk away and say that was a ripoff, and we're not going to get them back.
Is the answer for these brands to just wait a little bit until this space has played out a bit more? They have themselves a better understanding of what they could be doing here, what this really looks like, how this could be a multi-medium.
Yeah, I had a
type play.
I had a call last week with the quote head of metaverse for one of the big 5 studios in LA, and one of the studios that I think is guilty of this process. And my advice was, take a pause. Just stop what you're doing, take a pause, figure out what's going wrong, because you're burning your...
Did they listen to that?
They have a leadership team they have to report to, and they have a marketing team that wants to do this, and they have a development team that wants to do that. So the answer is, it's too soon to know if it's going to happen, but they're still doing it as of this moment.
Well, thanks for doing the good work. Trying to make it
better.
I
will say, I want these to succeed. We need these to succeed. These are new. A lot of these are new consumers. We want them in the space, and we need these projects to work. But if they're just going to burn their brands this way, these are the golden. This is the crown jewel IP of some of these studios, and you got to be careful with this. It's not like licensing T-shirts. It's content. It's storytelling.
There is a brand new staking feature in the Ledger Live app today. We all like staking the assets that we're bullish on, and now you can stake 7 different coins inside the Ledger Live app. Cosmos, Polkadot, Tron, Algorand, Tezos, Solana, and of course Ethereum. With Ledger Live, you can take money from your bank account, buy your most bullish crypto asset, and stake that asset to its network, all inside the Ledger Live app. Through a partnership with Figment, Ledger also lets you choose which validator you want to stake your assets with. And Ledger is running its own validating nodes, offering a convenient way to participate in network validation, and it even comes with slashing insurance. Ledger Live is truly becoming the battle station for the bankless world, so go download Ledger Live. If you have a Ledger already, you probably already have it, and get started securely staking your crypto assets. RARIBLE is the NFT platform that's leading the charge into the multi-chain universe ahead of us. Available on Flow, Tezos, Polygon, and of course Ethereum, RARIBLE is the perfect place for NFT newcomers, profile picture collectors, and experienced NFT traders. RARIBLE has a variety of NFT features that set it apart from other NFT marketplaces. They have a native messaging function allowing you to DM your friends or haggle with sellers. They also have a mobile app on iOS and Android with a built-in NFT portfolio tracker tool, so you can easily check the value of your digital art portfolio. RARIBLE is built on the RARIBLE protocol, a multi-purpose, open source, and community-governed NFT protocol that helps build products and services across the NFT ecosystem, including white label marketplaces tailored to specific NFT communities. So go to rarible.com and start discovering and trading NFTs, putting in floor bids to join PFP communities, and DM with some brand new internet friends.
Well, this maybe segues us into, in certain ways, I'll make the connection to the CryptoPunks news and Noah Davis moving from Christies, who folks may know him from Christies, and to becoming the brand lead for CryptoPunks. And something you highlighted to me is both Noah and then also whoever it was from Yuga Labs, Garga, I guess, who tweeted something and basically said, like, hey, we're not going to ruin CryptoPunks. We understand its cultural significance. We're not going to do like basically like shitty licensed lunchbox kind of deals.
Yep.
Now this is a little bit different because they're this is licensing going the other way. This is starting with an NFT and not like licensing it to like a lunchbox company versus starting with a Web 2 property and licensing it into NFTs. But touching on a very similar premise of like treating these properties seriously and not doing like cheap Happy Meal-esque deals, as to borrow a phrase that I've heard you use before. So talk a little bit about your reaction to this news about Noah and
I think
and CryptoPunks.
Yes, first of all, bringing in a full-time brand lead on Punks I think is a great move. Punks now, you could argue whether Punks ever should have been sold from Matt and Jon at Larva Labs to Yuga. I know there's some people who have mixed opinions of that, but they're at Yuga now, and I think being part of Yuga, they should have a brand lead that really is looking out for the Punks. Punks are different than apes, right? Punks are different than Meebits. They need a brand lead that respects and understands the unique community, culture, and characteristics of that brand. So that's a great move. I applaud them for that move. The tweet that Garga put out and Noah put out about shitty lunchboxes and TV shows, I did not like. I felt that was disingenuous. No, it's the right approach, but it's the wrong way to message that, because it's, on one hand, you're saying that that's crap. Why would we ever do that? And that's within the context of Punk's brand, I understand. But the way they put it out there felt like you're doing it over here on the left with your brands over here, but you're going to not do it on the right. So it felt like they were ignoring what they're actually doing on the other side of their business. Like, because Bored Apes have lunchboxes and TV shows in development and books in development. And it's like, I felt like they kicked their one brand down with that message. Then
that's interesting. So let me read the exact tweet from Garga, for example. Garga said, what Noah will be bringing to the table is for him to share. Much like us, he has no vision of Punks that includes rushed brand deals, shitty TV shows, or licensed lunchboxes. I see your point. I don't think I interpret it that way, because I think like Punks and apes and Punks and Meebits, like they are different, and apes can go and people can create lunchbox brands. I sort of editorialized when I said shitty lunchbox or whatever, like they said shitty TV shows. So I think leaving open the possibility that there maybe will be TV shows, they just won't be shitty ones.
No, I think you need to look at Noah's tweet, because Noah put it the other way around. He put shitty TV shows. So
no, that's what Garga said as well. Shitty TV shows. Like there won't be that. I don't know. It doesn't bug me. I understand the spirit of what they're trying to get at. And, I was thinking about this, and I think bringing somebody in from the fine art world is a great move, right? Because it shows, hey, we see CryptoPunks as fine art. And then I was like, does Picasso need a brand lead? Like, what even is Noah going to do day to day? Well, if that's what they're the play,
what they've promised in the announcement, which is to come, is the opening of the rights around Punks. So I think that's what the brand lead is really thinking through and going to be managing. Because what that means to me is there's going to be restricted rights. Because if you don't want lunchboxes, then you're going to have restricted commercial rights. But some of the Punk owners want those rights. So I'm sure they're looking for that balance of what gives our community rights that they would like and make them happy, but at the same time protect the unique position that Punks are in.
Yes. So this makes sense. This is like Punks are fine art in many ways. And you don't see even in the fine art one-of-one worlds of NFTs, for example, you don't see the kind of permissive rights terms that you see among the PFP world, because they just don't lend themselves to that in the same way. So that makes sense to me if Noah is being brought on to really meaningfully think through what are the terms and conditions here where we can give holders rights, but we can make sure we're protecting the integrity of
the
punks
brand
as really like a historical artistic relic that needs to be like a museum, like, properly sort of maintained, or like a historical home or something, like preserved by some sort of foundation.
I can also see two other roles for Noah. One being of the community lead. So being the person, it's almost like, it's like the maitre d' at a fine restaurant in New York. Like, here's my secret business card with my secret number, and you can call me anytime. I kind of see it like that kind of a service, which also fits very nicely with his background from Christie's. The other part of this is there are going to be punk meetups and punk parties, and I suspect he'll be coordinating and leading all of those efforts of kind of bringing this community, the global community, together.
Love it. Yeah, it totally checks out. I mean, when I think about what Sotheby's has done, they launched Sotheby's Metaverse, and I think one of the things that Sotheby's is excited about when it comes to NFTs and this technology is creating communities for their art holders in ways that they hadn't previously been able to do. Like, now, if you hold a Batiste, I don't know, whatever, insert fancy art here, you can tell that I'm not Basquiat. Isn't that a good one?
Jean-Michel Basquiat.
Whatever, insert fancy painting that I can't afford here. They can connect those art lovers and those collectors from around the world on their platforms. And I know they're seeing NFTs and like their Sotheby's Metaverse as a way to do that. And so, so Noah really coming on to facilitate those kinds of just communities around people who love this same fine art. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, he said, he's like, I'm going to be at NFT NYC. I'll be at the brunch. Come up to me. I will have basically open office hours to talk to any punk holders.
There's a funny picture actually of Noah I saw on Twitter of him at this brunch. He was obviously giving a speech to the crew, and he was standing up on one of the dining room tables at the restaurant. Kind of a little bit of a punk attitude, a little Yuga attitude, probably.
I know, because you can't take the Web3 out of the art collector.
Exactly,
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Even if they're a fine art collector.
So overall, good news for punks, I think, for the brand long term.
And clearly the market agreed, because the price of punks pumped pretty tremendously after that, which leads us to the insider trading accusations, of course. Once again, you had this surge of buying punks right before this announcement came out. You and I were talking about this a little bit earlier today. Like, there are clearly some people who got lucky, who saw punks had hit like a 45 ETH floor or whatever, and were like, this is obviously a price at which to buy punks. And then it seems like there were clearly a number of buyers who also just knew that this was coming.
And a few of these buyers have come out and said, I had no inside information. I just was just the right time, the right price. Yeah. But you look at the numbers, and it's pretty damning. Sales volume increased 780% on a dollar basis from the day before, and the trend before the announcement. The number of unique transactions went up 619% from 16 to 115 in one day. And the number of unique buyers went up from 16 to 72 in one day. So clearly there was...
People clearly knew it was coming.
It's not illegal. It is shady as hell. It is not the kind of presence that Yuga wants out there. And the fact it's happened twice... Actually, I looked at my notes. The last time I was on your show, on your podcast, was on the previous insider trading scandal from Yuga. So I seem to be coming on whenever there's an insider trading scandal at Yuga. But there's clearly a fire here, right? There's smoke, there's fire. There is just a raging, out of control problem, and Yuga has to get on top of it. Like, I won't, even though it's outside of my wallet right now. If I was in that category of buyer, I wouldn't touch anything Yuga does with a 10-foot pole until they get control of this. It's out of control. It's unacceptable. I feel quite strongly about that.
And it should be a really easy, I can see, and it's an easy solve, right? Like, it's like, hey, Noah, here's an NDA. Hey, anybody who works at Yuga, anybody who touches this deal, here's a thing you sign. Like, you can't tell people this. Like, this is not a hard problem to get a frickin' hold of, right?
Another thing that comes around is when this happens is there's a thing called the public ledger. This is on a public ledger. Yeah. You might have all know. You might have an anonymous wallet today, but there are people who are tracking that wallet and they will see when it moves, and they will eventually, might be a few years, but it will get tracked back to a person. It's not the reputation you want to have. It's not a way for Yuga to build what is probably the premier brand in the space right now. It's shitty. It's just shitty, and it needs to stop.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's icky. I feel maybe not quite as strongly as you do, but I share your general sentiment. I think it's icky. I think it's such a bad look. You are like trying to be the premier brand. Like, what are you doing? You know, like, keep a lock on things, be professional. Folks can't trade on information that they have because you're their buddy. And I don't know how this is playing out, right? But what it feels like is like they have friends and they're all sitting around getting brunch someday and they mention Noah's coming on and they're like, oh, so good time to buy punks, huh? And people go and buy a bunch of punks. Like, that's what it feels like. And it's very like old boys clubby, it feels, you know. I know, again, I don't know, maybe women were benefiting from this, but if I had to put money on the situation, I bet most of the people who have reaped this reward are dudes. And
and the other thing that happens is they have investors, like, you know, the Animoca is an investor in ApeCoin. So they have investors that will know this is coming, and it gets passed around in those investors' communities. And it's until there's some regulation around it, it's just going to keep happening. But Yuga as a leader needs to stand up and make a statement about it and just get control of the situation in their house.
We're getting close to wrapping here, only because I have it's NFT NYC, you know, so I got people to see, places to be. Let's try and move through these last couple of topics really quick. I mean, Doodles, it's almost a shame we waited this long for Doodles. I shouldn't have ranted as long as I did about something previously. Doodles they just have yet to misstep. I feel like, as a project, it's kind of freaking unbelievable. They just go from win to win. They are, you know, kind of leaking out news about Doodles too. Lots of announcements out about this. Their CEO wasn't there, but Julian Holguin, is that
I
how
believe
you
it's
pronounce
Holguin.
the last name?
Yeah, Julian Holguin. Yeah,
former president of Billboard, gave a really like, we're a professional brand presentation to holders this week while in New York.
And in fact, I would encourage anyone to look up on Twitter. Someone took some screen grabs or pictures of his Julian's speech, and the screen grabs of the slides, of the content, just seems spot on. Like, it's professional, it's well done. Clearly he's bringing, and the team is bringing some professionalism to the project. And if I were to say there was any big winner coming out of NFT NYC this year, it's Doodles. They knocked it out of the park. I'm blown away with what.
So why do you say that? What else would you say there gives you that impression?
They had an announcement video that was very well produced, extremely well produced. It's an animated video.
We'll link to all these things, by the way, the video, the tweet that he referenced earlier with images of the presentation.
Their presentation, what they announced, which is Doodles 2, which is the next, I guess, call it a next new collection around the Doodles brand. So they announced that. They announced a partnership with Pharrell to become the chief brand officer of the Doodles, which is amazing.
That feels huge. Pharrell is one of those, I mean, again, talk about knocking it out of the park. I think Pharrell, and I don't know what chief brand officer looks like for Doodles, but Pharrell sits in that amazing category of somebody who is obviously culturally feels like he's in the pocket of culture and can drive culture in amazing ways, and clearly has a track record of driving culture, and is business savvy and smart, and just like, and feels like he fits the Doodles brand for some
really
reason.
Does.
You know, like this whole thing just feels totally right. It's how I thought about Kith and the Invisible Friends partnership, which I've talked about on this show. That I really like that just fit to me for some reason. This just fits. Again, I'm not a Doodles holder, so I just like pump the Doodles bag on this
I'm not a holder
because I really just think they do it so fucking well.
I'm not a holder either.
They're one of the only projects I would say that's about this too, by the way. Like Yuga, I guess we haven't, did we talk about Yuga this? I guess we talked about the punk stuff, but you know, Yuga, a lot of respect for it, but I think they've lucked into more things than, I think they get credit for things that they've kind of lucked into. And Doodles for me feels like, I feel like they're building it. There's drivers at the helm of that thing who are so freaking savvy. And this gets to maybe our slightly more like traditional leanings, which is, I think, Doodles, there's a lot of these projects, and part of the luck thing maybe feels like that are maybe a little bit too degen in their leanings. And so it's hard to see how that translates to a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year, like multi-generational brand that survives. Some of this stuff, some of the CCO you and I feel this way about, or things where you're like, without like a really central visionary leaders driving things forward and making sure that there's a lid kept on things. Like, some of these brands feel like they could kind of get out of control. And Doodles just feels like they strike this really right balance of being so community oriented, but having leaders who are driving a vision and maintaining real, in a good way, control of the brand.
In fact, on that Twitter thread that had some of the slides that were someone captured from the presentation, there's a slide about their intent to grow the brand with content and storytelling. And I suggest people look that slide up because it tells you that there's a plan in place. I think there's probably more announcements to come with creative partnerships. So I think that's kind of something we'll hear later in the year. The other thing is that with Doodles too, they mentioned millions, quote, millions of NFTs. And I don't know what the details are. I'm really curious to learn more about, are they going to build like a layer 2? They're certainly not going to do that on Ethereum on layer 1. So I'm curious, are they building like sort of a dedicated app on layer 2, which actually be a layer 3, or kind of how are they going to do that? And millions has me wondering what they have up their sleeves. Like millions of Doodle NFTs is going to be interesting what those use cases are going to be.
Yeah, the millions of NFTs comment, I think, really is speaks to what we were getting at earlier, right? Which is that these projects who have had these conversations and are thinking really strategically are aware that they need to massively grow their engaged audience to really build what they want to build. This is what I'm hearing from Women in Weapons. Poopy really alluded to it when I interviewed him. Dead Fellas, I think, is aware of this. And that's what they're trying to achieve. I do think mechanically how this is going to work is fascinating. There were some people who, I was seeing some stuff on Twitter about like, maybe they're not going to use Ethereum. Maybe they're going to use Flow. I wouldn't love that for a variety of reasons. I understand Flow is like good for, mainstream users, but I really think the network effects are accruing on Ethereum, and that's the place to be. And layer 2s are really the answer, is increasingly the conclusion I'm coming to. Jordan seemed to say in a Twitter space, Jordan Castro Poopy was like, I strongly prefer the settlement layer to be Ethereum. So I think he's aware. I mean, Jordan was pretty involved in CryptoKitties and Dapper Labs. Right. He worked for Dapper Labs, and that, of course, built Flow. So they have relationships there, but I do think Jordan is really savvy about this stuff and seems to want to stay on Ethereum. So that does seem to suggest a layer 2 or even a layer 3, which folks may not be fully aware of what's happening on that side. But you can listen to my conversation with Robbie Ferguson. That'll be coming out because we talk about layer 3s.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in layer 3s, by the way. I think that's the way forward.
I agree. It's the modular blockchain concept of just we can like sharding and just layers create this dynamism for these decentralized, for an Ethereum, because the decentralization is, I think, a big piece of this working. I'm rushing here at the end because it turns out, am blowing off a meeting that I did not realize I was supposed to be in at the moment. And we have more, Jon, you and I, that we want to talk about. So I think we probably do a 2-parter for this episode, and we wrap right now so that I can go manage my currently entirely mismanaged life. NFT NYC, you have kicked my butt. I am dropping balls, and I hate to do that. But we will be back to talk about Hypermint and some of these other, a little bit more into some Yuga stuff we didn't get to. And otherwise, I hope folks are having a great week. If you're here at NFT NYC, I hope you've been having a great time. And Jon, thank you.
You're welcome. So much. Thanks for having me. And I'm looking forward to part 2.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.